Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're talking formal teacher evaluations. Now, you're going to have at least one formal evaluation as a teacher, and some of you are new teachers and you've never done this before. So I have some strategies and some resources you can pull so that you can hit those high-level areas on your teacher evaluation. Now, it's important to go easy on yourself. You are a new teacher, so it's okay if you don't hit highly effective on everything, but I'm going to show you some ways that you can pull some resources and understand exactly where you need to be so that you can crush it during your formal evaluation. Let's get started. All right, so if you are a teacher in the public school system in any state, you are going to be required to have a formal evaluation at the end of the year. Now, some districts do more than one formal evaluation. Some districts just do one at the end, but you should definitely be prepared for that formal evaluation. And the best way to do that is by pulling the rubric for your formal evaluation. Now, every district has a rubric. Every single state has a rubric for evaluations because it's so important to have a definitive measure. This is not just your principal coming in on a whim and deciding if you're a good teacher or a bad teacher. There are very large rubrics, very comprehensive rubrics that show exactly what highly effective teaching is, effective teaching is, needs improvement or developing teaching, and unsatisfactory teaching. You can't just get an unsatisfactory score from your evaluator or from your assistant principal or principal without it being measured against a rubric, okay? And you can't just be highly effective because your principal likes you and thinks you're a great teacher. You have to meet the criteria on a specific rubric. So today I'm going to show you a couple of different rubrics to do that with so that you can pull them on your own so you can see what those rubrics are. And there's going to be two here. I'm going to pull the general framework from Danielson, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second. And then I'm going to pull an actual rubric from the district's website so you can see kind of how they work together. And if you can pull those and have them out and where you can reference them for yourself, you're better able to kind of adapt your instruction, your planning, your assessments, and your outreach with parents in a way so that you're meeting these points on the rubric. So let's try it. So there are two main rubrics that are used when doing teacher evaluations. Typically, states use either the Danielson Rubric or the Marzano's Rubric. Now, other states have developed their own rubrics, and most districts and states have developed their own framework within these two frameworks. But typically, the overarching frameworks that govern the teacher evaluation system is either Danielson or Marzano. Now, they're very similar. Both Danielson and Marzano are education theorists, education researchers. They and their teams have built extensive rubrics, and there's research to back it up, and there's all kinds of information, on why this is used and things like that. And you can go ahead and research that if you want. But my main objective here today is just to let you know that those are the two main frameworks that are used in most states and most districts, okay? There are others, but I'd like to just focus on the two main that we're doing today. I'm going to focus on Danielson, but I am going to show you Marzano as well. They're pretty much the same. There's going to be some component of planning and preparation, some component of, student engagement and in the classroom. There's going to be some component of assessments, and then there's going to be some component of outreach, like with parents and the community and other stakeholders. Those tend to be the four main areas that you are evaluated on. Now, remember, if you are a new teacher, this is a lot. You're not going to be in the distinguished level on every single category, and you might not get any distinguished categories your first evaluation because you're first year, and the distinguished category or the exceeds category or the above category, it depends on what they call it. It's the highest category, okay? That is not always going to happen, and that is okay. You are still learning. And so as we go through this rubric, you'll kind of see where you are. And one of the things I think is very important is that you print off this rubric, the pieces that you need in order to kind of evaluate yourself, and use them throughout the year and kind of grade yourself. Like, how would you have rated yourself on today's lesson? Was it a total disaster? Or, did you do pretty good? Did you meet all the steps within the rubric? Some days are going to be great, and and other days aren't. And that's just the way it goes. So it's best to start early, pull this rubric, and really get to know it as you're planning your lessons, executing your lessons, engaging with students, and engaging with the community. All right, so let's go over to my computer here, and I'm going to show you the Danielson Rubric. I'm most comfortable with the Danielson Rubric because that's what my district used, and I evaluated teachers using this rubric. I even worked downtown where we made videos to kind of show teachers what these examples would be. So I'm very familiar with the Danielson Rubric, but there is the Marzano's Rubric as well. Both are very similar. Like this one is the Danielson Rubric. You can see here that she has, this is demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy. This is part of the planning portion. We're in domain 1, which is planning and preparation here. If you look at Marzano's, he has criteria here as well, and his is starting with high expectations for student achievement. That's still part of the planning and preparation because you're setting the expectations in your planning and preparation. It's just set up a little bit different. There's usually 4 categories in the rubric. You can see here with Marzano's, there's unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. And with the Danielson, it's the same. We have unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished, okay? So again, everybody wants to be in the distinguished category. And in your district, they might call it exceeds. It might be called that, or it might be called high level or highly effective. But there are typically 4 categories. One is unsatisfactory. The next one is like basic understanding, which might be where you are if you're a first-year teacher. The next one is you are meeting, you are proficient, and the following is the high level, highly effective, exceeds, or distinguished. Now, there are so many categories in these rubrics. To get distinguished all the way down in this rubric is going to be very, very difficult. And I know that's where everybody wants to be. But if you get proficient or even basic in some areas, it's not the end of the world. You're just a new teacher, or you just need some more work in those areas, just like you would tell your students. So you're in the basic level now. You don't always have to be in the basic level. You'll move up. You'll learn more as you become a better student and a better teacher. All right. So let's go into the Danielson Rubric. I am going to link this up in the comments so that you can print this out for yourself. But the rubric actually starts, or the domains actually start on page 8. There's a lot of information in the front, all of the research that she's used to build this thing, and all that's really important. And I do recommend looking at that, but I'm just going to go straight to the actual rubric here. So let me just zoom in a little bit on here for you guys. Okay. So you can see that this is demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy. Now, the word pedagogy is your practice, how you deliver instruction. We use that word pedagogy a lot, and I feel like people don't know what it means. But basically, this domain is all about planning and preparation. And in order to plan and prepare, you have to understand the content, all right? And a lot of us are put in content categories or in content areas that we know nothing about, myself included. I was hired as a biology teacher and when I first started, and I knew nothing about biology. I got better and better as I went on, and I worked really hard, and it was fine. And I learned it, and it was good. And I had a great year, and my students did well on their assessments. But, sometimes you're put in an area you don't know much about. So that's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to public education, especially with teacher shortages. But with this domain, you're going to want to have that content knowledge. And that means before planning a lesson, you really want to review it, understand it. If it's biology, cells, and you haven't seen that in a long, long time, you're going to want to review that and make sure you understand what's going on. But you can see here, let's just take a look at what unsatisfactory is. It says, in planning and practice, the teacher makes content errors, does not correct errors made by students. So, displays little understanding. This is where you don't really know the content you're teaching, and this can be problematic, obviously. And then it says here are the attributes. Here are some examples. So you're making content errors. You do not consider prerequisite relationships. So a lot of times in math, science, English, all of that, the kids have to have prerequisite skills. So you're not, thinking about that. And then you use inappropriate strategies for discipline. So you're just kind of a hot mess in this situation. And you know what? We've all been here. I've made content errors. I've made content errors live on webinars here in front of you guys. These things happen. It doesn't make you a bad person or a bad teacher. It's just, you got to do better. We got to make sure we don't make those mistakes. And especially when students are asking you questions on the fly. I used to have a lot of very smart students in my science class, and they would ask me very difficult questions. And I learned early on, don't try to fake it. Don't try to pretend that you know, because it's very obvious. One thing you can do is just say, I'm going to get back to you on that. Let's work through that together, or here's some extra credit. Why don't you find the answer to that situation? And that helps. But you want to, for the most part, have a command of the content and understanding of prerequisite skills for that content. And then they give you possible examples here of what not to do. Okay. So, again, some of us have made these mistakes. I myself have made these mistakes. So this gives you possible examples here of what not to do. Now let's just take a look at what the basic level is over here. This is a level 2. Basic means you're just starting out. You're meeting it a little bit, but you're rudimentary. And some of you, that's where you are. You're just started. It's okay. So this says the teacher is familiar with important concepts, but displays a lack of awareness of how these concepts relate to one another. So maybe, let's just take biology, for example. Maybe you understand cells, and you understand DNA, and you understand heredity, all in different components, but you have a hard time kind of connecting them for the students and how they relate to one another, okay? The teacher's plans and practice reflect a limited range of pedagogical approaches. Well, of course, because you're new. You're not going to have an unlimited amount of pedagogies and practices that you're going to be using. So you might be here. Let's take a look at some of the examples here. Teacher's understanding of discipline is rudimentary, all right? Teachers' knowledge of prerequisite relationships is inaccurate or incomplete. So you kind of know they need prerequisite skills, but you don't really, boost them. Lesson plans and unit plans use limited instructional strategies, and some are not suitable for the content. So your lesson plans are not great. And then they have, kind of the examples here of what that's going to look like, okay? Now, let's go to the proficient level. You can see here that displays a solid knowledge. So you know what you're talking about here. Demonstrates accurate understanding of prerequisite skills. So now you're accurate. And your practice reflects a familiarity with wide range, effective pedagogical approaches on the subject. This is actually really good. I mean, to be proficient, you got to be on your game really, really good. And here you can see the examples here. I like to go to the actual, what teachers would do. Like here, you can see the teacher's plan for area perimeter invites students to determine the shape that will yield the largest area for a given perimeter. So they're giving you a math example here. The teacher has realized her students are not sure how to use a protractor, and she plans to have them practice that skill before introducing an activity. So this is the anticipation of student knowledge and prerequisite skills. So as the teacher, you anticipated that skill and you know they're going to need practice. And then you have here, the teacher plans to expand a unit on civics by having students simulate a court trial. So these are all really good pedagogical practices, planning practices. This is a rock star teacher right here. Just to be in the proficient column is pretty rock star. Now let's take a look at distinguish. Now distinguish is off the charts here. You can see here displays extensive knowledge. Now, if you've been a biology teacher for quite some time, or maybe you were a biology professor or a math major and you really understand the content knowledge, you might be here as well. And you understand important concepts in discipline and how these relate both to one another and other disciplines. Now, when we say discipline here, we're not talking about students getting in trouble. We're talking about disciplines in terms of content areas. So we're talking about one discipline versus another. So how math is a discipline and science is a discipline, and they kind of go together, and it's a good way to do interdisciplinary work. The teacher demonstrates an understanding of prerequisite relationships. So we want that. And then understands the link to necessary cognitive structures to ensure the students' understanding. Again, we're high level. This is rock star teachers. And then here's the lesson plans. The teacher's plans and practice reflect familiarity with a wide range of effective pedagogical approaches and the discipline and the ability to anticipate students' misconceptions. Here's the thing. Anticipate students' misconceptions. Well, where does that come from? That comes from years of teaching. That comes from years of teaching science and going, every year my students have this misconception about evolution or misconception about heredity, or maybe it's English. They have a misconception on how to use prepositional phrases, or they really mess up on their misplaced modifiers. That comes from year after year after year of realizing what is tripping students up. You got to be a teacher to know that stuff. So that's why distinguished is really hard to get, because anticipating student misconceptions takes practice. Now you can see here in the examples, the teacher cites intra and interdisciplinary. So intradisciplinary is inside the discipline. Maybe you're connecting cells to heredity, you're connecting all those things. And then interdisciplinary is where you're connecting math and science and social science. So let's just say it's a unit on stem cells, or it's a unit on DNA. All right. And I'm a high school biology teacher. And I decide to not only bring in the science piece, but I also bring in the social studies piece through the controversy of stem cell research, right? That was a big political controversy back during the George W. Bush days. And so, and I actually did that in my science classes. We talked about that. And so you're taking that DNA kind of abstract science concept that they're working on in their science text, and then you're bringing it to the real world through the social studies, where, maybe you're talking about how there's a Senate bill on the floor to either approve stem cell research or not, or to give the funding to stem cell research or not. And so that kind of brings in the social studies unit. So that's interdisciplinary. Intradisciplinary is connecting it to other pieces within that particular discipline. And then we have the teacher's plans demonstrate awareness of possible student misconceptions and how they might be addressed. So again, you're anticipating those misconceptions. And then your plans reflect recent developments in content-related pedagogy. What that means is these recent developments here means the research. So no matter what discipline you're teaching, science, math, English, art, PE, whatever it is, there is research that governs your particular discipline. And this shows that you're reading that research and you're actually incorporating that into your lesson plans. Now, who's doing that? Probably not a whole lot of people. I mean, especially first, second year teachers, you guys are drowning. You're not out reading peer-reviewed academic journals on your discipline. But as you get better and you start to work through your professional development, you'll start to see this. You'll learn all these, trends and things like that in the research that governs your discipline. So again, this is the distinguished level. This is the I've been a teacher for a long time. I really know what I'm doing, and I have all of these skills and pedagogical, concepts that I'm using that support the distinguished piece. And then here, there are some examples. So look at this. In a unit on 19th century literature, the teacher incorporates information about the history of the same period. So we've got literature, which is English, and then we have the history part. So that's that interdisciplinary connection piece. Then we have, before beginning a unit on the solar system, the teacher surveys the students on their beliefs about why it is hotter in the summer than it is in the winter. So this is anticipating students' misconceptions, right? Because we know that the tilt on the Earth's axis is why it's hotter in the summer and cooler in the winter. But students may not know that, and they might give you all kinds of crazy, they might come up with all kinds of crazy answers as to why it's hotter in the summer and cooler in the winter. But that little, quick assessment, that survey, that's a formative assessment that the teacher's using here. So that's going to help the students, get through that, all right? So, and it's going to help the teacher understand the misconceptions and preconceptions. So that is how you use this rubric to kind of plan. Now, this is a lot. Take a look at this. Now, here, we're down here. Here's demonstrating knowledge of students. Now we've got all this, unsatisfactory, basic. Let's go to the proficient. And we have the teacher understands the active nature of student learning and attains information about those levels. And then it gives you the examples here. It's really important that you pull this and you look at it and you understand, how to meet these levels. Now, this is the overarching Danielson rubric. Now, if I go to my teacher evaluation rubric here for my district, this is what it looks like here. All right. And you can see we have highly effective, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. It's the same thing as the Danielson. Distinguished is the highest, then proficient, then basic, then unsatisfactory. And you can see here, it starts with collects and uses data to develop and implement interventions with problem-solving framework. So this is your data-driven decisions. And you can see under highly effective, it says uses and facilitates collecting district data relevant to informing problem identification, problem analysis, all that. So you're using a variety of data to drive your instruction. Here we have analyzes and integrates multiple sources of data. So you're not just using your classroom data, but you're using state data, formative assessments, summative assessments, all of that. And here you have, you're using MTSS and multi-tiered systems of supports and intervention programs, so this is the rubric that you would use for that if you taught in this district. Other districts have a different rubric. So that's really the first thing you need to do when it comes to pulling your rubric and understanding where that comes from. I like the Danielson framework as something for you to pull and kind of have as a reference just in general, but then you also definitely want to pull your specific rubric for your particular district so you know what your district is looking for when it comes to your classroom in your school in your district. They might have some more specifics there. So the first thing in becoming an awesome teacher and killing it on your teacher evaluations is to pull the rubric and figure out exactly where you want to be and where you need to be and what you need to do to meet that. Now, again, you're probably not going to be in the highly effective column for everything your first, second, third year teaching. You're going to be in these other columns, maybe effective, maybe in the developing column or the basic column. That's okay. And I know people really take it personally when they're there. But if you look at the effective and the highly effective, that's not just about being a good teacher or kids liking you. It's about using all of this data and understanding your pedagogy and, making connections with other content areas and doing that consistently, not just doing that on the day that your principal comes in, because it's not going to look good if your principal comes in and all of a sudden you decide to do an interdisciplinary unit and you've never done it before. That stuff takes a lot of time and practice. So really, when you're in the highly effective or the exceeds column or the distinguished column, you've been doing this a long time and it's not just a one-day thing. This is something that is integrated in your instruction all the time and in your planning all the time. All right, so that is how you pull the rubric. I will link the rubrics up in my description below so you can pull them. Be sure you go to your district's website and pull your own evaluation rubrics. There is a rubric out there, I promise you, because this is too important not to have a criteria by which you are evaluated. It's not just by the principal's whim. It is by, something solid. This is how they measure your effectiveness in the classroom. So your district has something like this. Pull it, print it, look at it, figure out where you are right now, and figure out where you want to be. You probably want to be in the distinguished or the highly effective column, and figure out what you need to do consistently on a daily basis in order to do that. All right? That's how you use the rubric. Hopefully that clears things up for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications button so you're notified when we upload new content. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to film about that. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.